Welcome to Orange Coast University. Let me start that again. Welcome, everyone, to the Orange Coast Unitarian Universalist Church's special Stormy Zoom broadcast. My name is Donna McCartney, and I'm delighted to be your worship associate today. While the wind and rain from Tropical Storm Hillary are preventing most of us from being able to congregate safely in our church, we're delighted that you're all able to join us today on Zoom. Welcome. I'm joined by Beth Stuyvesant, our Director of Music Ministries, and Karen Magoon Pearson, our Director of Religious Education for Children and Youth. We welcome you this morning. Our minister, Reverend Sean Wilshire, is not leading the service today. She's on sabbatical, but she has a special message for you.
Hello, everyone, and hello, Reverend Everett. I am really happy that I get to introduce you all to Everett. I have been working with him for the last year on this sort of collegial thing that we were doing, and he is fabulous. He's the guy that that not only is he going to do what he says that he'll do, but he'll do it with compassion and kindness and creativity, and you're going to be laughing while you do it. So I'm just really excited that you all get to meet this wonderful, wonderful person. He's one of those colleagues that I hope to get to know better in the years to come. So Everett, have a fabulous service. And yes, this is the congregation I constantly brag about. I hope you enjoy being with them as much as I do.
So stepping in for Reverend Sean today, as she said, is Reverend Everett Howe. His sermon is entitled, How We Fight. Throughout our history, Unitarian Universalists and our spiritual ancestors have fought for justice, sometimes by building bridges across divisions, and sometimes through direct conflict. In this service, we're going to explore the tension between these two approaches to how a gentle, angry people can build beloved community in the face of oppression. Reverend Howe is a UU minister based in San Diego. He continues to spend half his time with his first calling, research mathematics. He and his wife, Isabel Firth, are members of the first UU of San Diego and have been members since 2005. We would also like to recognize the many volunteers that have helped put this service together today. Their names are on the screen, and pictured on the screen also are the flowers that Jacques Kiltor sponsored to celebrate Elizabeth's birthday. So happy birthday, Elizabeth. They are arranged beautifully as usual by our Sandy Martin. We're grateful today for our Zoom tech team, especially Avery and Steve, who don't want credit, but they did amazing work to pull this all together for us today. So thank you. Plus everybody who behind the scenes has scrambled to put together this virtual service for you today. So thank you. We respectfully recognize that our church property rests on Ahashiman and Tongva land. As Unitarian Universalists, we have many different beliefs, but we are a loving community. We are bound together not by a common set of rules or beliefs, but rather by a covenant. A covenant is simply a promise that whatever our beliefs, we accept and encourage each other in spiritual growth. We affirm that all life has inherent value and that all existence is interconnected. We strive for justice and compassion in our deeds and in our relationships. And we strive to create a welcoming community. Since we are all Zoomers today, you are invited to say hello in the chat, and I see many of you already have. Thank you. We want to extend a special welcome to visitors. If you're seeking a spiritual home, we hope that you will find it here. Later in the service, you will have an opportunity for you to introduce yourself, and if you'd like to do so. After the service, we will be placing everybody who remains into a Zoom breakout room for about 20 minutes for coffee and conversation. Everyone's welcome to join, and it's a great way to get to know the other members in our congregation. We begin our worship with the lighting of our chalice. If you have a chalice or a candle at home, you are welcome to light them at this time, and we'll light them together. Let's say our unison affirmation together right now. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. To dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another. This we affirm together.
Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to see you. It feels like old times back in the day when we used to do this all the time. And we chose this song, "Building Bridges," long before we knew there was this storm coming. But perhaps it's even more apropos today. We might need to be building some more bridges. So this song will set us up for this service today about justice seeking. And if any of you would like to sing around, we won't hear you because you're all on mute, but I will play around on the piano, and you can sing with my right hand of the piano if you would like. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all our divisions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
The words of the Reverend Libby D. Stoddard. We have come into this room of hope where our hearts and our minds are opened to the future. We have come into this room of justice where we set aside our fear to name freely every oppression. We have come into this room of love where we know that no lives are insignificant. We have come into this room of song where we unite our voices in the somber and beautiful melodies of life. Welcome to worship.
Good morning. Our story today is about Julia Ward Howe. There she is on the screen, and about how she did something that she never thought she could. So way back in 1861, more than 160 years ago, Julia lived in the city of Boston, Massachusetts with her husband and their 6 children. Her husband Samuel was a doctor and a social activist, someone who tried to change laws so that they would help more people. And Julia spent most of her time taking care of their children and their home, because many people in those days thought that was the work that a woman should do. But Julia also found time to write poetry and plays, and people knew she was a good writer. Now, in 1861, the Civil War had just started. The states in the South of the United States thought that slavery should be legal, that people should be able to own other people. The states in the North and the West knew that slavery was wrong. And Julia wanted to help fight against slavery, but she didn't know what she could do. Julia and Samuel were very good friends with the governor of Massachusetts. Sometimes he would come over to their house for dinner and a nap, my kind of friend. And late in 1861, he invited them to come with him to Washington, D.C. to visit President Abraham Lincoln. And so they set off on a long journey to Washington. The Southern Army was not far from Washington, D.C., hoping to attack it, and the Northern Army was stationed all around the city to protect it. And as Julia and her friends got close to the city, their carriage drove in amongst the soldiers. Some of the soldiers were singing, and Julia and her friends joined in. The melody of the song went like this. Na 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 na. But Julia's friends thought that the words the soldiers were singing could be better. And one of her friends said to her, "Why don't you write some good words for that tune?" Even though she was a poet, Julia had never written words to a song before, and she didn't think she could. But sometimes our friends know what we can do, even when we don't know it ourselves. So that night, long before the sun had come up, Julia had trouble sleeping. And as she was lying awake in her bed, she thought of some words for the song. And then she thought of more words, until she had written 6 verses. With all of these words swirling in her head, she thought, if I fall back asleep, I might forget them all. So she jumped out of bed, even though it was still dark, and she rushed to her desk and found a pen and paper and wrote down all of the words as fast as she could. Then she went back to sleep. Later on that trip, Julia and her friends did visit with Abraham Lincoln. She remembered this visit for the rest of her life, and she wrote of the sadness she saw in President Lincoln's blue eyes. She wondered again how she could help fight the war against slavery. But what she didn't know yet was that she had already helped. Her new words for the song were published in a magazine a few months later, and soldiers from the North started singing this new song, which was called the Battle Hymn of the Republic. It spread around the country to wherever Northern soldiers went, and people everywhere learned it. People still sing Julia's song to this day. So that's the story of how Julia Ward Howe wrote the words she is most famous for and helped the fight against slavery, even when she didn't think she could.
Our reading this morning is excerpted from the Mother's Day Proclamation of 1870, again by Julia Ward Howe. Arise, all women who have hearts. Say firmly, our husbands shall not come to us, reeking with carnage for caresses and applause. Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. We, women of one country, will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs. From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, disarm, disarm. The sword of murder is not the balance of justice. Those are strong words for peace. And in a moment, we will sing some strong words for action. Balanced between those two poles, let us take a moment of silent meditation. I will ring a bell at the end.
Please join me in singing. Once to every soul and nation comes the moment to decide. In the strife of truth with falsehood, for the good or evil side, then to stand with truth is noble when we share its wretched crust. Ere that cause bring fame and profit, and 'tis prosperous to be just. Though the cause of evil prosper, yet 'tis truth alone is strong. Though its portion be the scaffold, and upon the throne be wrong, then it is the brave one chooses, while the coward stands aside, till the multitude make virtue of the faith they have denied.
In 2005, my wife and I walked into a Unitarian Universalist church for the first time. I had not been a part of a church community before because I had grown up unchurched, and there was a lot of basic church-going stuff that I had to learn. But because I like to sing and can read music, the hymnals were a great lifeline for me. Everyone else might have known Blue Boat Home by heart, but I could read the music and keep right up. So our hymnals became dear to me, and I paid a lot of attention to the music in services. And one thing that is hard to miss is that our hymnals are full of songs about peace and songs about reaching out, like Building Bridges, which we sang just a moment ago. We've got hymns that ask, when will the fighting cease? And hymns about forgiving one another and beginning again in love. We've got hymns that pray that we might be instruments of God's peace. We've got songs that tell us that while we may love our homes, other people in other countries love their homes just as much. Even our protest songs highlight our peacefulness. We are a gentle, angry people. So I distinctly remember the shock I felt when I first sang these words. Once to every soul and nation comes the moment to decide, in the strife of truth with falsehood, for the good or evil side. This was not about peace and reaching out. No, this hymn says, there is good and there is evil, and you have to decide now which side you are on. And by the way, says the hymn, most people have chosen evil. The people in power have chosen evil, and choosing good may lead to your death. They were pretty intense back then in the 19th century. And I have to say that that sentiment, those words, have taken on more meaning for me now than they did when I first heard them in 2005. Indeed, more meaning now than since I first preached about this song, which was 2 months before the 2016 election. Once to every soul and nation comes the moment to decide. That applies to so many issues right now. We have a revived movement for racial justice after Ferguson and after George Floyd's murder. And at the same time, white supremacists have become much more bold. We finally have marriage equality. We finally have marriage equality, and we have the state of Florida literally criminalizing some forms of health care for transgender people. And those are just two of so many issues of social justice that are calling out now for our attention. Once to every soul and nation comes the moment to decide. And how do we respond? Well, when words from our hymnal seem so relevant to things that are happening today, I want to know, where did those words come from? What issue was their author facing? And for Once to Every Soul and Nation, the year was 1845 and the issue was slavery. Texas joined the United States that year as a state where slavery was legal. And the expansion of slavery into Texas inspired James Russell Lowell, the son of a Unitarian minister, to write a poem expressing his strong feelings about the immorality of slavery. The poem appeared in the Boston Courier in December 1845 with the title, Verses Suggested by the Present Crisis. And it was immediately picked up by other abolitionist publications. The poem's influence is felt to this day. The official magazine of the NAACP, called The Crisis, was named after the poem. Then, in 1880, 3 Unitarian ministers edited several stanzas of the very long poem and published them in a hymnal. In fact, this hymnal, which I would have shared in show and tell if I were there in person. In 1916, their words were set to the music that we use today, and in 1993, the editors of our gray hymnal condensed the original 3 verses down to 2. I think they made those changes partly to remove references to God. Originally, the 3rd verse went something like this. Though the cause of evil prosper, yet 'tis truth alone is strong. Though her portion be the scaffold, and upon the throne be wrong. Yet that scaffold sways the future, and behind the dim unknown, God is standing in the shadow, keeping watch above his own. Yet that scaffold sways the future. That is such a powerful line. Stand up for what is right, says the hymn, even though you might die for your beliefs. God will see that it is not in vain. So we have this powerful hymn that tells us to choose sides, to fight injustice, to not give an inch. And then we have the other hymn that we sang this morning. Building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Now, this song came from the early years of the Greenham Common Women's Peace Camp, an anti-war protest in England that lasted nearly 2 decades. It started in 1981 when the British government agreed to house cruise missiles at the Greenham Common Air Base. So in May 1982, 250 women blockaded the base. By December 1982, 30,000 women joined hands and encircled the base. In 1983, 70,000 people formed a 14-mile-long human chain from the airbase to a munitions factory. And in between those major events, protesters camped out around the perimeter of the base, and their peaceful protests inspired similar camps all across Europe. Now, the song Building Bridges also recognizes the division between right and wrong, but instead of suggesting violent conflict, it speaks of a different way of making change, by reaching out to people you disagree with in order to change their hearts and their minds. So here's the question. How do we decide, as individuals and as a community, which approach to take when we are faced with injustice? Do we embrace conflict, knowing that we are fighting for good? Or do we build bridges and hope that those relationships will change people's minds? Let me tell you about someone important in our Unitarian Universalist history who embodies the tension between those two approaches. Julia Ward Howe, no relation. In our Time for All Ages, you heard the story of how Julia Ward Howe came to write the words that she is most famous for, the Battle Hymn of the Republic. I bet most of you are familiar with the beginning of that song. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. But the other verses are not as well known today, and the 5th verse of the song contains an image that is so powerful that most modern versions of the song either skip it or change the words. The 5th verse goes, "In the beauty of the lilies, Christ was born across the sea, with a glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me. As he died to make men holy, let us die to make men free, while God is marching on." As he died to make men holy, let us die to make men free. In 1861, this was not just a figure of speech. Union soldiers sang this song while marching to battles from which many would not return. The Battle Hymn of the Republic took the sentiment of James Russell Lowell's abolitionist poem and put it into action. But in 1870, just 9 years after she wrote those words encouraging men to go to war, Julia Ward Howe wrote something completely opposed to war. We heard part of her Mother's Day proclamation in today's reading. From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, disarm, disarm. How could those words come from the same person who wrote the Battle Hymn of the Republic? And I have to admit, for a long time I assumed that Julia Ward Howe must have had some kind of change of heart. More than 1 million people were killed in the Civil War, more Americans than have been killed in all of our other wars before or since combined. 1 million people. And I wondered, did all of this death and all of this misery change her mind about war? Now, recently I went through her autobiography and other writings by her and her daughter Florence with this question in mind. And it is clear to me now that she did not change her mind about the importance of the battle hymn, and she did not regret the war that her words supported. So why did she write the Mother's Day Proclamation? In her autobiography, Julia Ward Howe relates how the Mother's Day Proclamation was inspired by the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 and the behavior of the victorious Germans afterward. She viewed that war as barbaric and unnecessary, and she thought that the issues at stake in that war could easily have been settled without bloodshed. So, for Julia Ward Howe, slavery was an ongoing evil that every day was creating suffering and death, and she had no qualms about encouraging people to take up arms against it. But at the same time, she thought that most war was unnecessary and immoral. She supported violent action when she felt it was necessary, but I imagine she would have felt right at home with the Greenham Common Women's Peace Camp, protesting military buildup and singing about harmony among different peoples. And this, I think, is the point. Individuals and communities like ours can choose both strategies for fighting injustice, and they are not necessarily in opposition to one another. When there is an immediate evil whose continuation is causing present harm, fierce, decisive action may be called for. I am thinking, for example, of the families of trans people living in Florida, and there are many other situations that you might have in your mind. In cases like these, it is not enough to spend all of our time trying to win over the politicians who passed the cruel and unjust laws in the first place. We also need some direct action. For instance, setting up systems to protect families and to help them move to safer locations. But there are situations where you may be dealing with a person or group that is not causing immediate harm, and that is, and this is important, acting in good faith. For instance, you might have a relative or a loved one who you disagree with, or who has basic questions about some issue of social justice that is important to you. When there is time to talk with someone, and when you think there is hope of changing their mind, then building bridges can create a lasting good. So, different situations call for different responses. Sometimes we will build bridges, and sometimes we will embrace conflict. But either way, we do need to take sides. And there are two things to remember. First, there will be other people fighting for a cause that you care about who will choose a different way to respond. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were on the same side, and recent scholarship shows that some of the apparent divisions between them were exaggerated by the media. And second, no matter how you respond, people will say that you're doing it wrong. If you take direct action, you will be told that nonviolent protest is the only way. If you protest nonviolently, you will be told that you are being disruptive and alienating moderates, and that the only appropriate response is to wait quietly until the next election. And if you campaign for new elected leaders, you will be told that your issue is divisive. So when you are faced with all of this pressure to wait, to calm down, to temper your expectations, to be reasonable, remember, once to every soul and nation comes the moment to decide. May those words call you to action, thoughtfully, responsibly, and powerfully, as Unitarian Universalists who fight for justice. Blessed be.
And now our closing song is going to be by Holly Neer, We Are Gentle, Angry People, or actually, it's actually called Singing for Our Lives. And maybe after today's sermon, you will hear this slightly differently as you really listen into these lyrics. And when Holly is saying singing for our lives, I don't think she's being hyperbolic. I think she's like really saying singing for our lives. So let's sing this with deep thought and consideration of these words and with respect for all those who've come before us in this fight for justice. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. Justice. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. Gentle, loving people. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for
Unitarian Universalist congregations are fully self-supporting, meaning that members and friends raise all the funds for our operating budget, ministries, and the programs of our church. We're ever grateful for your gifts of time and treasure and your talent. OCUC amplifies that spirit of generosity by sharing one half of the plate that we receive with an organization that shares our values. Although we have no plate to pass around in our building today, this month we are sharing the plate with Heartfelt, a nonprofit dedicated to saving lives from this nation's #1 cause of death, sudden cardiac arrest. Here at OCUC, we're honored to be able to support this organization by sharing the plate with Heartfelt. There are multiple ways which you can support this church and our organization. You can mail a check, you can go through our website, or you can use an app called Vanco Mobile. The choice is yours. All the information is on our website should you need it. And as always, thank you so much for your generosity. is the time when we honor the important events in our lives. You're invited, one and all, whether you're a member or a friend. Oh, wait a minute. I think we need to do the offertory response first. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's no problem.
Okay, sorry. I jumped right in there too early. Sorry, Beth.
The money doesn't work if we don't sing this song, so we got to
Okay,
sing.
there we go.
Okay. We gather together, we gather as one, for peace, love, and justice for everyone. We give from our hearts to show that we care. We can change lives with what we share.
Okay, now is the time to honor the important events in our lives, our joys and sorrows section. You're invited, one and all, whether you're a member, a friend, or a visitor, to participate in our weekly rituals of joys and sorrows. So let's take a deep breath. Perhaps you've come here today holding something close in your heart. Moments from the last days or hours that have struck you at your core. If you'd like to honor such a profound joy or sorrow, you're invited to do so. We do this by lighting candles, and you can light one at home if you have one. It's a wonderful way to honor what you hold in your heart. I'll light a candle in just a moment for all of us. If you would like to share your joy or sorrow with the congregation today, you can write it in the chat right now. Let's take a few moments in contemplation as we listen to some music, and then I will begin reading the joys and the sorrows out loud. Please remember to allow everyone to type in their joy and sorrow first and hold off on reacting or commenting until everyone's had a chance to put in their joy or sorrow. So thank you. Okay, so let me share with you the joys and the sorrows. You can also read them in the chat yourself if you'd like to. Judith says that Friday would have been my grandmother's 123rd birthday. So she's writing this in memory of Doris Hadley Robinson. Peggy Driver says to everybody, she has a joy. I will be celebrating my 71st birthday this week. Congratulations, happy birthday, Peggy P. Alex Patterson has a concern. He's worried about this storm, especially for often forgotten and underserved desert communities. Thank you, Alex, for sharing that. We're concerned too. Maureen M. has a sorrow. She says that Reverend Dr. Finley C. Campbell, founder of the UU Multiracial Unity Action Council, has died just short of 89 years. Thank you for sharing that. Sarah J says, joy that the weather was tame enough this morning for my husband to fly out of John Wayne Airport to Cincinnati, wishing him continued safe travel. Matthew P has a joy and a concern. His joy is that Fullerton College classes for fall semester starts tomorrow. I have all online classes this semester, but I also have a full plate. His concern is that even with this storm going on, my work has not called off tomorrow, so I risk getting an attendance strike if I don't go into work. So please pray that the weather is not too bad to drive or that the company calls us off, those of us who are not already working remote. So we'll keep you in our thoughts and prayers. Matthew P. So Laura G says she is concerned for her nephew who's driving to Texas for a new job. She says, safe travels, dear Daniel. And the Victoria room, so I guess it's Tom is in there holding down the fort for us there in the church. He says he has a sorrow. Alejandro, maybe this is Alejandro's sorrow. In any case, here's the sorrow. I was in Lake Arrowhead last Wednesday, scoping out perhaps mountain living, and 2 days later, last Friday, at an LGTB ally, Laurie, owner of the Magpie shop, was shot and killed, yikes, defending her pride flag outside her establishment. As a trans man, this has struck me to my core, and as I sometimes lack the strength myself to stand up because of fears like this. She didn't know me, but I feel profound love from someone I didn't even know. Wow, that is a profound sorrow. Thank you for sharing that. We'll keep that family in our prayers. So Sarah J says, she says, happy birthday to Elizabeth Kiltor, whose birthday was last Thursday, and to Gina Martinez, whose birthday was yesterday. Thank you for sharing that, Sarah. Nancy says, thank you to all the presenters and for all of your flexibility this morning. Stay safe. Laurie Carlton, RIP, proud LGBT ally. Thank you, Nancy. Ben says to everyone he has a joy. He thanks Linda and Craig Speary for hosting the delicious potluck last night. He had a fun time. Okay, so I think that's all the chats that I can see. Hopefully I didn't miss yours. Okay, so now I'm going to light a candle for all the joys and sorrows spoken and unspoken today. You can't see it yet, but I'll show you. There it is. Let us hold in love all the joys and celebrations and all the hurts and sadness, both spoken and unspoken today. Let our joys remind us to be thankful, and our concerns remind us to hope, and our sorrows to remind us to connect. Let all these moments remind us that we are not alone. Now let us join together as we extinguish the flame of our chalice. And we say together, we extinguish our chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's been a step back to our Zoom-only days, and so we're so delighted you were able to join us. Looks like we have almost 60 people in attendance, so thank you so much for reaching out so we could connect this morning. We are a congregation made up of people who all believe differently, and yet when we gather together, we make up one loving community. We need not think alike to love alike. If you're a guest or visitor or someone who hasn't yet been known to us, I invite you to become part of this beloved community. We encourage you to write in the chat your name and where you're from so we can welcome you. So would anyone here like to introduce themselves? Let me see, I see one person in the chat here, but that's not a new person. Okay, so if you are new and you would like us to introduce you, make sure your name is written in the chat again right now, and then raise your hand and your hand reaction button, press that and we'll spotlight you. So I think we don't have any new folks, which makes sense because we're happy that just our regulars are here. Okay, I don't see any. All right. So if you'd like to know more about our church, including our programming for our youth and our children, please contact us at hello@ocuc.org and we'll help get you connected. In addition, we invite you to sign up for our weekly email called The Blast at blast@ocuc.org. We want everyone to feel a part of this beloved community. So please reach out and we will help you get connected. After the benediction, we will be placing everyone who remains online into Zoom breakout rooms for about 20 minutes for some coffee and conversation. Everyone's welcome to join in, and it's a great way to get to know the other members of our congregation. So as you can see on the screen there, we have a few things we want to highlight in terms of announcements. Our Wild and Scenic Film Festival is coming up on September the 30th. Tickets are on sale now, so check the blast to find them and a link to purchase them. Also, we'll be celebrating Reverend Sean's 10 years at OCUC on October the 14th. So save the date and come ready to celebrate. If you're a member of our beloved choir, we're now back to the first choir rehearsal of the new season. It's this Thursday at 7 p.m. in Daniels Hall. Welcome back. These are only some of the announcements, so please check the blast to stay up to date with our church happenings.
As we sang earlier, we are a gentle, angry people, called towards justice and compassion by a voice in our hearts, still and small. Let that voice guide you to your own way of bringing justice and compassion into the world, for there is no denying. When that voice calls, you must answer. Go in peace.
Thank you, Reverend Everett, for being with us today. We typically sing a song called Let Us Go Out, but don't go out. Don't go out the rest of the day. Just stay inside. So we're going to sing a song reprising this from COVID era, Be Safe, Be Well. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. This service is over, but let our service continue.